Hello you dirty dogs and welcome back to One on One, the most detailed football show on YouTube. Isn't that right, Martin?
That might be the understatement of the century.
Now, to celebrate the return of Scottish football, we're going to put our transfer hats on and recruit for both sides of the old firm as they lock horns in what could be a historic season. Celtic are chasing their 10th consecutive title in a row, which is something that no Scottish club has done before them, while Rangers, who have won the division a record 54 times, are desperately trying to stop them. Both clubs belong to a select group who have won over 100 club titles, so new bragging rights are pretty rare and mean everything to their devoted fan bases. The rivalry may not have the star-fueled prestige of El Clasico or the technical wizardry of the Classica, but in terms of history, passion and white-hot hatred, this matchup has very, very few equals in world football. Currently, Celtic have the stronger squad, the more stable finances, and the country's outstanding player in 22-year-old Frenchman Odsonne Edouard. It's widely understood that the former PSG man will secure a Premier League move once the 10 is ushered in. Meanwhile, Rangers star asset, Colombian international Alfredo Morelos, scorer of 29 goals in all competitions last season, may be on his way to Ligue 1 side Lille for a cool £17 million. If Steven Gerrard is allowed to reinvest this money, it may help level the playing field. So it's safe to say that this is the most important transfer window in Scotland for the last decade. However, recruiting well for the old firm is not an easy task, largely owing to the lack of commercial revenue in the Scottish game. This is especially pronounced when compared to the numbers down south. For context, Celtic reportedly earned £3.35 million for winning the 1920 edition of the SPFL. By comparison, Huddersfield Town were given £42 million in parachute payments following their relegation from the Premier League the season before. This is why qualifying for the Champions League group stage is so important to the old firm sides. In fact, it's worth around £30 million when they do so, although neither side has reached the promised land since the 17-18 season. Subsequently, Celtic suffered a fall of revenue in 2019, but were still ranked as one of the top 70 richest clubs in the world. Rangers, meanwhile, experienced a 63% increase in turnover after battling through the Europa League qualifiers, meaning they ranked in the top 120. The reality is that the money coming in doesn't really match up with either club's historical standing in the game. However, such is the passion and commitment of the fans, they ensure that standards don't slip. Both clubs are expected to compete for the title, win at least one of the two domestic cups on offer, blood young talent from their famed academies, and go relatively deep in Europe, regardless of the financial constraints. Now, I will caveat this with, given the financial disparity between the old firm and everyone else in Scotland, this should be the bare minimum. As freelance scouts for both clubs, it's up to you and I to juggle these elements, and I want you to get your suggestions in as we go along in the comments below. However, before we go any further, it's important to have a greater understanding of the culture at both clubs and their tactical blueprints. Dossier: Celtic. Celtic have the largest annual revenue and the biggest wage bill in the country. However, despite their relatively robust finances, the club's famously pragmatic hierarchy are unlikely to deviate away from their usual frugal approach, even to make history. In light of this perceived inactivity, the Green Brigade, who are an ultra group situated in the North Curve, have openly accused the powers that be of jeopardising their chances of landing the 10 through lack of first team investment. Since Steven Gerrard arrived in the blue side of Glasgow, he spent around £30 million net. In that same period, Celtic have made around £17 million profit, frequently offloading their best players. The boys have also said goodbye to perfectly functional squad members ahead of this season in order to trim the wage bill. Perhaps further evidence the board are being extra scrupulous in the face of economic uncertainty. So we'll likely be operating on a tight budget. This cautious approach is also reflected in their recruitment, where Celtic have adapted their approach quite drastically in the last few seasons. The focus used to be on sounding out players aged between 20 and 24 from smaller teams in reputable divisions. Now that clubs with greater resources have clocked onto this market, Celtic have had to change tack. The emphasis now, or at least a large part of it, is targeting the highly rated and highly frustrated young players in English football's academy system. Recent additions include Jeremy Frimpong from Manchester City, Manchester United's Leo Connor, Southampton's Jonathan Afolabi, and Arsenal's Armstrong Okoflex. So it appears our second stipulation will be to recruit young players that we can turn a profit on in the next 3 to 5 years. While Eastern Europe has fast become a focus, inside sources told The Athletic that, owing to COVID, Celtic will only be buying players that they know, given they're unable to scout overseas players firsthand. So with this in mind, I'm going to keep my suggestions a little closer to home, only drawing from the English Championship, a division where there's still plenty of value to be had. For consistency's sake, I'll be applying the same rules to Rangers, and if this video does well, we can have a scour around some of Europe's more obscure leagues. And while Celtic don't need as many starters as Rangers, the club should be bracing themselves for the departure of at least 3 first-team players next season. This will also be a consideration when we put our suggestions to the board. Dossier: Rangers. In more recent seasons, Rangers have shown that they've now got the quality to go toe-to-toe with Celtic, as long as their starting 11 remain available. However, when circumstances have worked against them, i.e. injuries or suspension, their lack of depth has cost them big time. This was the case last year when they capitulated after the winter break. This was despite triumphing at Celtic Park in convincing fashion for the first time in 10 years in late December. Despite their inconsistencies on the pitch, sizable progress has been made off of it. As per The Athletic, Gerrard insisted that when he came to the club, they develop a Premier League infrastructure. This included major surgery to the training facilities. The gym and communal spaces were updated, the club invested in a cryotherapy chamber, and a brand new lecture theatre for tactical debriefs was quickly installed. To provide their rookie manager with the adequate level of support, new positions were created, including a head of medical and a head of performance. So, how do the Gers continue this sense of progress on the pitch? As journalist Jordan Campbell remarks, Rangers' biggest problem at the moment is probably a mental one. They now have a sound tactical blueprint, but are without that unifying moment, having failed to win a major trophy in the last 10 seasons. So, while we should look to make the general profile of the squad marginally younger, we should also factor in a need for experience and personality. In Ryan Kent and Joe Aribo, Rangers have 2 exciting young talents with excellent pedigree, the latter of whom Gerrard personally convinced to come to the club after he left Charlton, despite strong interest from Benfica and Frankfurt. In fact, Joe Aribo was the only midfielder last term to post an expected assist value of over 0.2. As such, sourcing a creator who can find those roaming 10s in Gerrard's front lines with line-splitting passes will take precedent. In the final third though, they were significantly behind their cross-city rivals, and that's not just in creating, but sticking it in the onion bag. Despite a healthy 2.2 goals per 90, Celtic put up a frightening 2.8. New recruit Kemar Roof should help plug this gap to an extent, but I'm of the opinion that more reinforcements are needed. Defoe's 38 this year, Morelos' departure looks imminent, leaving only Greg Stewart as backup. With this in mind, we'll be looking for a quality forward that brings something new to the table, enabling Gerrard to mix it up tactically in-game. The shortlist. Despite Greg Taylor making a fine start to the season with 2 assists against Hamilton Academic, Celtic need to add more quality and depth to that area. One of the main directives of Neil Lennon's 4-2-3-1 system is countering aggressively and at speed. The fullbacks are absolutely crucial for enacting this. With this in mind, I believe that Celtic should target 23-year-old Derby left-back Max Lowe. Although often overshadowed by right-back Jayden Bogle's exploits, Max Lowe had a stellar campaign for Derby in 1920. Per 90, he completed a monstrous 7.1 defensive actions, showing a particular aptitude for dispossessing his opponents. His numbers aren't quite as spectacular going forward, but still show signs of promise, with Lowe fit for chance creation at Derby, creating nearly 1 opportunity for his teammates per match. And it's no surprise that he often finds himself in advantageous positions, completing 1.6 dribbles per 90, the 4th best in the squad. With a valuation of £1.4 million according to Transfermarkt, Celtic could pay 3 times that and they'd still be getting a bargain. 6'5" Norwegian centre-half Christopher Ajer is reportedly not keen on signing a new contract amidst interest from Leicester City and AC Milan. My answer to this conundrum? Barnsley's 6'4" Dane, Mads Andersen. At 22, he's the same age as Ajer, and while not quite of the same vintage, there's really promising signs that he has a much higher ceiling than staving off relegation to League One year after year. At first glance, the Dane's tackle numbers look relatively uninspiring at 1.3 per 90. However, scratch beneath the surface and you will see this is partly owing to system, with Andersen the more conservative of Barnsley's centre-back pairing. On a more promising note, he's shown fantastic levels of anticipation, completing a staggering 2.8 interceptions per 90, ranking him the first in the division for that metric. The 5.2 aerial duels that he wins per 90 also bodes well for the rough and tumble of the Scottish game. Now, there are other obvious areas for improvement. He is a bit of a rough diamond, with his pass accuracy at a less than impressive 68%. However, again, we can attribute some of the blame here to Barnsley's pragmatic defending. They play the 9th most long balls per game in the league, and only one person in the whole squad has a pass accuracy above 80%. No defender ranks above 73%. His 45 passes completed per 90 is the second highest in the team, showing that he's pretty comfortable receiving it short, something Ajer has been relied on at Celtic in the recent past. Andersen was bought in at the start of 1920 for just 900k, and his current valuation sits at around 700k according to the conservative transfer market. If you offered Barnsley 4 times their initial investment after just one season, I think they'd have a long, hard think about it. Now, I must admit, I was struggling a bit here, bereft of ideas until I noticed that QPR youngster Bright Samuel was heading to Club Brugge for just 4.5 million. Now, he's not the centre forward we wanted, but when opportunity comes knocking, guys, you answer. Now, apparently the deal has stalled as Bright's camp anticipated someone else coming in for him, but as that hasn't happened of yet, I wouldn't be surprised if it had been completed by the time this video goes live. Last season, Bright racked up 13 goal involvements in 34 starts, with most of his appearances coming on the right of a forward 3. Samuel's main weapon is his mazy dribbling. In 1920, he completed 3.2 per 90 with a 65% success rate, meaning he ranked 5th in the entire division. Frustratingly, there is a disconnect between this ability to beat his man and to create high quality chances, with his key passes sitting at a pretty average 1.3 per 90, only just good enough for the Championship's top 50. Bright is also guilty of not offloading when the opportunity presents itself, and lost the ball 2.8 times per 90 last season, double that of James Forrest when he was playing in the Europa League. However, when on song, the former Blackpool man can be utterly decisive. While taking a relatively low amount of shots, he actually took more shots inside the box than highly touted teammate Eberechi Eze, finishing the campaign with a highly respectable expected goal and assist value of 0.43 per 90, the 3rd highest in the squad. At 22, his resale value could soar as well if given the correct coaching. And not only that, he's ready to make an impression now. For me, this is a deal that should be struck on price alone. Rangers. Now, this may feel like a strange place to start given that we established Rangers were very good defensively last season. However, when you assess the fitness of their current centre-backs, it becomes much clearer as to why cover is needed. Nikola Katic has a cruciate injury and is currently out until at least February 2021. Leon Balogun has had 13 different injuries since 15-16, missing 18 games in his first 2 seasons with Brighton. And 27-year-old Philip Helander, who joined from Bologna for £3 million in 2019, had a foot injury last season that kept him out for 24 games. This leaves Connor Goldson and the relatively inexperienced George Edmondson as the only centre-halves with a clean bill of health. With this in mind, I'm putting forward 23-year-old Matthew Clark, who spent last season on loan at Derby from Brighton, to get the ball rolling. After overcoming a knee injury in December, Clark put in a string of assured performances and finished the year as a contender for Derby's Player of the Year award. And while not being a high volume tackler, he's an extremely good distributor, completing almost 60 passes per 90, which is a team high, with an 83% pass accuracy to boot. This skill set is extremely simpatico with what Gerrard demands from his centre-halves in his highly structured 4-3-3, where play invariably begins from the back. Clark is also capable of playing more direct, completing 3.5 long balls per 90, bested by only one outfield player at Derby, Wayne Rooney. Despite not being the quickest, Clark is only dribbled round once every 3 games thanks to excellent positioning, and has displayed a calmness that's belied his years, completing the most clearances in the squad and conceding the fewest fouls in the back 4. Rangers don't exactly need a starter, but another hungry, promising youngster would certainly be welcome. In 1920, only left-back Barisic averaged over 0.3 assists per 90 for players with 1,500 minutes or more under their belt. At Celtic, there were 3, and this doesn't even include the likes of Griffiths, Rogic, Elyounoussi or Michael Johnson, who all suffered various injuries, preventing them from posting significant game time. So, in order to match Celtic's productivity in the final third, Rangers need a consistent creator, and few are as effective when they're on the pitch in last season's championship than Izzy Brown for a relegation-threatened Luton. The Chelsea loanee created a whopping 3.2 chances for his teammates per 90, third in the division for midfielders with over 1,400 minutes. Encouragingly, 2.2 of those were from open play. Ultimately, this yielded a highly respectable 7 assists, which would have ranked him joint first in the Rangers team last term. After being thrust into the limelight at West Brom, where he became the 2nd youngest player in Premier League history, Brown's stock has taken a knock in recent years. After being on the peripherals of Jose Mourinho's Chelsea in 2015, he was then loaned out to 5 different teams, with his lowest point coming during an injury-hit spell at Leeds in 18-19, where he only mustered 2 appearances. After revitalising his career at a struggling Luton, where, despite another hamstring injury, he clocked up 25 appearances, Brown is no doubt looking to now revive his career at a top club. Years ago, he was one of the hottest properties in the EPL. Now the Peterborough native is worth just 1.8 million and only has 12 months left on his long-term Chelsea contract. If Gerrard can convince him, like he did with Joe Aribo, that he'll thrive under his tutelage, then Rangers might just back themselves a bargain. Now, the thought of Troy Deeney and Scott Brown going into a 50-50 in an old firm makes me an extremely happy man. The other targets on this shortlist have been painfully realistic. This one, not so much, but just feels so right. Now, Troy Deeney at 32 is unlikely to have a long queue of top-tier suitors, despite those mind-boggling links with Tottenham on loan. He needs surgery on a problematic right knee for starters. Half of his goal haul last term came from the penalty spot, and he's got 12 months left on a 65k a week contract. This substantial wage and the absence of a relegation clause doesn't really leave Watford with a lot of room to manoeuvre. 4 years after the Hornets turned down £25 million from Leicester City, their snarling striker could spend the last year of his contract, his 11th year with the club, out on loan, as long as someone's willing to cover that wage of £3.3 million per annum. Now, while he's not exactly a perfect fit for a Steven Gerrard system, who encourages his 9s to drop deep in order to make space for his floating 10s to make blindside runs, he would offer the Englishman something different. Now, last term, Deeney was winning a, quite frankly, incredible 8 aerial duels per 90. That's like prime Andy Carroll. You mix that with Tavernier or Barisic's pinpoint delivery, and you have yourself something pretty potent, my friends. Yes, this might mean playing 2 up front or going slightly more direct, but at least in that sense, Gerrard has a bit more tactical flexibility. Now, this is harder to quantify, but we also spoke at the start of the show about Rangers' need for big characters, someone to shoulder the responsibility should they find themselves experiencing another mid-season collapse, and I think Deeney would absolutely revel in that role at the Bears. Also, at 32, is anyone else going to offer him the chance to play European football in front of 50,000 fans? Probably not. So, if Watford do want to go another way, if they do want to push the reset button, offload some high earners, there are rumours they also want to make Will Hughes captain, they want to make him the fulcrum of the side, then Deeney might be available just by covering his wages. if Rangers have to pay a loan fee as well, then it becomes a little bit financially irresponsible. Just think, him versus Brown. We've needed that since El Hadji Diouf left. So, Old Firm fans, what do you think of those transfer targets and who would yours be? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want me to find talent from another league, what would that be and why? Again, stick it in the comments. And don't forget, you can follow the best of Scottish football at Sky Scotland on Twitter, who have the goals now. We also get rights to the interviews. Victory dance. That means a lot more Scottish football content coming from Football Daily. Get to push my agenda. And you can also watch the highlights on Sky Sports' YouTube channel. So that's it for this week's one-on-one. I really hope you enjoyed it, guys. Please like, subscribe, go and check out some more great FD or EFD content right now, and go and drop FD Podcast to subscribe as well. Your support is thoroughly appreciated, and the guys are producing excellent content week in, week out for your viewing pleasure. Bye. Fucking get in.